Coming up on The World Today. U.S. and China trade angry words at high-level Alaska talks. French capital set to go into a month-long COVID lockdown as the country fears a third wave of the pandemic. Plus, Samia Suluhu Hassan makes history as Tanzania's first female leader. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. The first high-level talks between the Biden administration and China taking place in Alaska has led to an exchange of sharp rebukes. Chinese officials accused the U.S. of inciting countries to attack China, while the U.S. said China had arrived intent on grandstanding. Relations between the two superpowers are at their most strained in years. The ill-tempered talks involved U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on the U.S. side, facing off with China's most senior foreign policy official, Yang Jiechi, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi.
Well, time has not been short.
We'll have an opportunity to discuss key priorities, both domestic and global, so that China can better understand our administration's intentions and approach. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability. That's why they're not merely internal matters and why we feel an obligation to raise these issues here today. I've said that the United States relationship with China will be competitive where it should be, collaborative where it can be, adversarial where it must be. Our discussions here in Alaska, I suspect, will run the gamut. Our intent is to be direct about our concerns, direct about our priorities, with the goal of a more clear-eyed relationship between our countries moving forward.
Human rights group Amnesty International says China has forcibly separated Uyghur families by taking young children into state orphanages. In a new report called Amnesty called on China to release all Uyghur children being held in orphanages without consent of their families. The charity spoke to parents who left children with relatives in China when they were forced to flee the country. Rights groups say China has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs. The Chinese government has also faced allegations of a wide range of human rights abuses against the Uyghur people and other Muslim minorities, including forced labor, forced sterilization, sexual abuse, and rape. Well, our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Byrne joins us now to talk more about that meeting between the Biden administration and China. Maria, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, this was an unusually undiplomatic trade-off, wasn't it? Especially for a meeting called to take stock of the U.S.-China relationship under a new American administration.
You're exactly correct. This was, this first revealed that the top officials from the U.S. and China, will be meeting in Alaska this week. And the degree of optimism could have been marked by a new relationship. And, as you said, the Biden administration is new, and this will set a new tone for the way in which China and the U.S. will cooperate with one another. And the U.S. relations, have deviated, obviously, from the normal track and ran up against some very big difficulties since the establishment of the diplomatic ties.
Well, speaking more on U.S. relations, President Biden has vowed to take a very different approach from his predecessor, Donald Trump. But what we've seen so far, how easy or how challenging will that be?
Well, as you know, this will be extremely challenging, especially in the wake of, some of the financial crises that exist in the U.S. and really across the world. And so they've, obviously been warned that the U.S. shouldn't stop meddling in the Chinese internal affairs. And so, and as you know, the Biden administration is very strong on human rights issues. And so as it relates to that, you will probably see some economic turmoil because of, the various political and human rights differences between the two countries.
Well, Chinese officials did seem particularly angry that Washington had imposed sanctions on them just the day before the talks. What can you tell us about this?
Well, these sanctions are obviously the way the U.S. is letting China know that they will not be, they will not stand for that, and that they are obviously in disagreement with some of the ways in which China is going about its various human rights issues. And so I think at this time, what you're going to see is that the U.S. is going to obviously move forward many of the diplomatic discussions, and we'll probably see a much better relationship in the coming days. It really was going to be sent as a warning sign to China that the U.S. Did have a difference of opinion. And so we'll see in the coming days that there will likely be some changes to that, because it is going to be vital for both China and the U.S. to have a diplomatic relationship that is one of a friendship due to the various ways in which the economy in both China and the U.S. have been impacted as a result of the pandemics.
Well, Maria, all in all, did anything substantive come out of this meeting?
We have not seen where this is going to really, this was one of those diplomatic kind of appearances. And so we have not really seen where this will lead to anything other than further conversations between the two countries, which will then begin to probably see a list of items that will come as a result of it. But we can expect to definitely see some more meetings between the two countries.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be keeping our eye on the situation there. And Maria, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
On to other stories. The trial of Canadian citizen Michael Spavors, detained by China since late 2018 on suspicion of espionage, has ended after a closed court hearing that took about 2 hours. Spavor and his lawyer appeared for the hearing, and the court will later set a date to issue a verdict. Chinese courts have a conviction rate of over 99%. China arrested Spavor and fellow Canadian Michael Kovrig in December 2018, soon after Canadian police detained Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of Chinese tech giant Huawei Technologies, on a U.S. warrant. Canadian diplomats outside the court said they had no access to Spavor or the trial, but will continue to work for his immediate release.
We're unable to have access to the courtroom. We were also unable to have access to Michael Spavor himself before the trial. But nevertheless, the trial is now concluded. There's been no pronouncement of a verdict, so that leaves it remains unclear what has transpired in the courtroom. And we remain frustrated about that. But then, nonetheless, we will continue to work diligently for the immediate release of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, whose hearing will be on Monday in Beijing.
Malaysia's foreign ministry has denounced a decision by North Korea to sever diplomatic ties, describing the move as, quote, unfriendly and unconstructive. In a statement, the ministry said Malaysia would close its embassy in Pyongyang in response and order all diplomatic staff at the North Korean embassy in Kuala Lumpur to leave the country within 48 hours. North Korea earlier announced it would sever diplomatic relations with Malaysia after a court there ruled that a North Korean man could be extradited to the United States to face money laundering charges. And on to security matters, the Taliban has agreed to try to accelerate peace talks with the Afghan government at a meeting in Moscow that followed an international conference there on peace progress. Moscow hosted the international conference in Afghanistan on Thursday, at which Russia, the United States, China, and Pakistan released a joint statement calling on the Afghan sides to reach a peace deal and curb violence, and on the Taliban not to launch any offensives in the spring and summer. The summit comes just 6 weeks before a deadline for the United States to pull out troops that have been in Afghanistan for nearly 20 years. And President Joe Biden must soon decide whether to keep forces on past May 1st deadline or to withdraw. Agreed with the Taliban last year under Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump.
We had 18 months of negotiation with the Americans, and they agreed that they will withdraw in 14 months. And the time is now going to end at the end of April and 1st of May. And they should go, because if they do not go at the end of April, that means they continue. After that, it will be a kind of violation of the agreement. That violation would not be from our side, but it would be from their side. So in that case, if there is action, of course there will be reaction.
The French capital is set to go into a month-long COVID-19 lockdown as the country fears a third wave. Prime Minister Jean Castex says the measures will not be as strict as the previous lockdown, with people allowed to exercise outdoors. France has recorded more than 35,000 new infections within the past 24 hours. This comes as several European countries resume use of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine after EU regulators gave the go-ahead. Here's more on this and other developments in our COVID-19 Global Update.
21 million people in 16 areas of France will go under a limited 4-week lockdown from late tonight to fight off a third wave of infections. Non-essential shops will be shut down, but schools and hairdressers will stay open and outside exercise will be allowed within 10 kilometers of your home. In the meantime, the French government says there is no reason for France to reject the AstraZeneca Oxford University COVID-19 vaccine. France has resumed use of the vaccine a day after the European Union's drug watchdog said it was convinced that the shot's benefits outweighed any risks. The French Prime Minister is one of the first people to receive the jab following the resumption. Meanwhile, several European countries, including Germany and Italy, have also resumed using the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine after regulators found no evidence it causes blood clots. Over in Germany, Health Minister Jens Spahn says he would be in favor of signing a national supply deal with Russia for its Sputnik V vaccine for COVID-19. He also dampened hopes that further coronavirus restrictions will be lifted soon, saying rising infections could mean that curbs to slow the spread of the virus may have to be reimposed. The Philippines have approved Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. The country, which has been fighting a recent spike in cases, is set to receive the first batch of the Sputnik V doses in the first half of April. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban says the country's health system is coping with the record wave, but restrictions would have to stay in place. He says the first stage of reopening will start once 2.5 million people out of the population of 10 million have been vaccinated. Currently, 1.5 million have been given a jab. And finally, India has reported its highest number of new daily COVID-19 cases in 3 months. The majority of the 39,726 new recorded infections came from the western state of Maharashtra, which accounted for 65% of the cases.
Tanzania's first female president, Samia Hassan, is calling for unity in the nation even as she takes the helm of affairs in the country. During her inaugural speech, she says it is time to bury differences and be one as a nation. She was sworn in by Chief Justice Ibrahim Juma at the State House in Dar es Salaam.
Mimi Samia Suluhu Hassan.
Samia Hassan is making history as the first female president of Tanzania and in the East African region. She becomes the 6th president of Tanzania following Wednesday's death of President John Magufuli from heart-related complications. Wearing a red hijab and taking her oath on the Quran, she was sworn in at the State House in the country's commercial capital, Dar es Salaam.
I was lucky to be Magufuli's vice president. He was a leader who was never tired of teaching and leading by example. He taught me a lot. He was my mentor and prepared me sufficiently.
On Wednesday, just before midnight, as a vice president, she was tasked with breaking the news of the president's death to the country. Under 48 hours after the announcement, she is now the first female president of the country, calling for unity and a time of healing.
This is the time to bury our differences as a country and be one as a nation. It is time to console each other, show each other love, our unity, maintain peace, our humanity and patriotism and Tanzanian values.
Mrs. Hassan is also the country's first head of state from the semi-autonomous Zanzibar archipelago. Described as a softly spoken consensus builder, her leadership style is seen as a potential contrast to the late John Magufuli. She will now have to grapple with the health impact of COVID-19 that her predecessor long denied, including whether to procure vaccines. She also faces the pandemic's economic consequences in a country polarized after 6 years of Magufuli's rule.
And over to the United States, as the judge in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer charged in the death of George Floyd, has denied a request to delay or move Chauvin's trial out of the county. Judge Peter Cahill said that because pretrial publicity is likely to continue, delaying the trial would not affect Chauvin's right to a fair trial. Chauvin, a 44-year-old white man, has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. His lead lawyer, Eric Nelson, has complained to the court that publicity around the trial has tainted the jury pool in and around Minneapolis, not least the city's announcement last week that it would pay Floyd's family $27 million to settle its wrongful death lawsuit.
The purpose of a change of venue is to ensure that the defendant has a fair trial by an impartial jury. The same is true as the basis for the defense's latest motion to continue, with the hope that as time passes, people forget some of the pretrial publicity. Unfortunately, I think the pretrial publicity in this case will continue no matter how long we continue it. And as far as change of venue, I do not think that that would give the defendant any kind of a fair trial beyond what we are doing here today. I don't think there's any place in the state of Minnesota that has not been subjected to extreme amounts of publicity on this case.
In the meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden is to meet with Asian American leaders in Atlanta today following this week's deadly shooting at 3 spas in Georgia. A day earlier, Korean community leaders gathered at one of Atlanta's Korean restaurants to discuss the Atlanta area shootings that left 8 people dead. Robert Aaron Long has been charged with murdering 4 people at the spas in Atlanta and 4 more at a spa in Ackworth, Cherokee County. 6 of the victims were women of Asian descent. Long, a 21-year-old white male, told investigators that a sex addiction led him to violence, according to the police. Hate crimes against Asian Americans rose by 149% in 2020 in 16 major cities compared with 2019, according to the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism.
The reason why we are so angry about this situation is that the way the police has been conduct the investigation and then make the statement. And one statement recently made by the police saying that it was a bad day for him. What kind of statement is that? The focus should be to the victims. Okay, so this kind of police briefings and then making more angry to the Korean Americans and Asian Americans.
I noticed the media people telling me he's crazy, but I don't think he's not crazy. Beyond him, he had an anti-Asian hate crime. We need to stop here. It can be happen, you, anybody. And all the media people telling me he's his sickness, but I don't think it's not sickness. We need to stop here anti-Asian hate crime.
3 people have died and 7 others injured after an explosion hit an apartment building in the Moscow region city of Kimki. According to the Ministry of Emergency Situations, a gas explosion presumably occurred in a 9-story building. Authorities say families of the victims will receive compensation in the amount of 1 million rubles, or about $13,455. The investigative committee has also opened a criminal case on services that did not meet safety requirements. Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg has urged world leaders to stop making empty promises and treat global warming as a crisis, as she joined activists for a global climate strike in central Stockholm. The movement, which urges global leaders to listen to climate scientists, had called on activists around the world to join a global online school strike under the banner, quote, "No more empty promises." All right, well, that is a wrap for the program today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.